Just days ago, farmers in southeastern South Korea were watching their reservoirs shrink. Under one of the worst droughts the region had seen in years. Then, almost without warning, the sky did the exact opposite of what it had been doing for weeks. The city of Geoje recorded 851 millimeters of rain in 3 days, over 33 inches, including a single hour where more rain fell than the city had ever recorded in that span since records began in 1972. A landslide tore into the first floor of an apartment building. At least one person was killed, several injured, and more than 150 residents evacuated. Today, we're breaking down exactly what happened in Geoje, how a region can flip from drought to catastrophic flooding in a matter of days, and why this kind of extreme weather whiplash is becoming a pattern worth understanding. No guessing, no dramatizing, just the facts, the science, and the real stakes. According to South Korea's Ministry of the Interior and Safety, torrential rain battered South Gyeongsang Province through Monday, August 17, 2026, triggering floods and landslides across the region. At around 4:42 a.m. that morning, a landslide struck the first floor of an apartment building in Geoje's Okpodong neighborhood, according to the Korea Times. Firefighters dispatched to the scene rescued 2 residents trapped on the buried first floor and pulled out a third, who was unconscious and later declared dead at the hospital. According to the Korea Meteorological Administration, Geoje received 851.1 millimeters of rain from midnight Saturday through 1 p.m. Monday, with a later Korea Jungang Daily report citing an even higher cumulative figure of 909.8 millimeters through 4:30 p.m. that day. Nearby Tongyeong recorded 704.8 millimeters. Geoje Island in Busan received 441 millimeters, and Sachin recorded 380.5 millimeters. Geoje alone recorded 124.5 millimeters of rain in a single hour, beginning at 1:32 a.m., the highest hourly rainfall total the city had recorded since the meteorological agency began keeping records there in 1972. By Monday morning, Geoje had also logged 539.3 millimeters of rain in a single calendar day, marking the highest daily rainfall total on record for the city. The scope of the flooding overwhelmed local emergency systems quickly. According to the Korea Herald, authorities in Geoje and Tongyeong alone received 1,147 reports related to the heavy rain as of 11 a.m. Monday, while firefighters rescued a total of 136 people across the affected region, the Korea Times reported roughly 159 residents were evacuated, with the Star separately citing around 150 evacuations, and Reuters citing approximately 100 residents evacuated specifically from Geoje, due to the risk of further landslides, figures that varied slightly across outlets as the emergency situation continued developing throughout the day. At around 2:42 a.m., ahead of the landslide, Geoje's city government issued an emergency notice warning that the Mundong Reservoir faced a high risk of overflow, urging nearby residents to evacuate before the reservoir's condition worsened further. City authorities also suspended bus operations and household waste collection due to flooded and damaged roads, and closed some tourist attractions for the day. Social media footage verified by multiple outlets showed vehicles partially submerged and swept along by strong flowing water through Geoje's streets. South Korea's Prime Minister Han Seong-suk directed police, firefighters, and other safety authorities to use all available resources to rescue residents and assist evacuees, specifically instructing officials to ensure evacuees faced no inconvenience, including through the operation of temporary shelters, while also emphasizing the safety of rescue workers operating at the disaster sites themselves. Here's the detail that makes this story genuinely remarkable, rather than simply another flooding event. According to the Korea Herald, this deluge marked a dramatic reversal for a region that had been struggling with severe drought only days earlier. From July 1st through the Saturday immediately preceding the flooding, South Gyeongsang Province received just 141.8 millimeters of rain, only 19% of the average rainfall for that period. In other words, in the span of roughly 6 weeks, the region had accumulated barely a fifth of its normal rainfall, only to then receive several times an entire summer's typical precipitation within a single 3-day window. The impact of this reversal on the region's water infrastructure was immediate and measurable. According to Korea Jungang Daily, the average water storage rate at agricultural reservoirs across South Gyeongsang Province rose from 32.2% on Friday to 43.1% by 2 p.m. Monday. In Geoje specifically, local reservoir storage jumped even more dramatically, from 28.7% to 73.6% within roughly the same window. The 3-day cumulative rainfall total in the region amounted to roughly 90% of South Gyeongsang's entire average precipitation for the whole June through August summer period, meaning nearly an entire season's typical rainfall arrived within 72 hours. This pattern, an extended dry period followed abruptly by extreme concentrated rainfall, isn't simply bad luck. Meteorologists studying precipitation trends globally have increasingly documented a broader shift toward what's often called precipitation whiplash, where the total amount of rain a region receives over a season may not change dramatically, but the way that rain arrives becomes far more uneven, longer dry stretches punctuated by shorter, far more intense rainfall events, rather than rain spread out more evenly across the season the way it traditionally has been. A warmer atmosphere plays a direct role in this shift. Warmer air holds more moisture, meaning when a rain-producing weather system does finally move into a region after a dry stretch, it often has considerably more atmospheric moisture available to release than a similar system would have decades earlier, arriving as a shorter, far more intense burst of rain rather than the same total volume spread across more days. We discussed a related version of this dynamic when covering the catastrophic flash flooding that struck Texas Hill Country and the historic wildfire that struck southern Spain earlier this year, both driven by the same underlying combination of prolonged heat and drought, creating the conditions for whatever rain eventually does arrive to trigger disproportionate, fast-moving disaster. South Korea's monsoon season has produced serious flooding disasters in recent years, providing useful context for how this event compares. According to Wikipedia's documentation of the 2025 South Korea floods, 3 separate periods of heavy rain in July and August of that year killed at least 23 people nationwide, with a further 9 reported missing and more than 18,000 residents evacuated, an event South Korea's weather agency at the time described as a once-in-a-century disaster. Going back further, the 2023 South Korea floods killed at least 47 people and caused an estimated $590 million in damage across North Chungcheong, North Gyeongsang, and South Chungcheong provinces. This year's Geoje event, while producing a comparatively lower death toll so far, distinguishes itself specifically through its localized rainfall. Intensity, the highest hourly and daily rainfall totals ever recorded in the city, arriving directly on the heels of one of the region's more severe recent droughts. As of the most recent reporting reviewed for this video, the Korea Meteorological Administration had forecast an additional 80 to 150 millimeters of rain for South Gyeongsang's southern coast, meaning the region's emergency response remained active even as initial rescue operations continued. Namwon's city government separately issued an apology after an environmental group documented partially treated wastewater being released into a stream flowing into the Nakdong River, an additional complication to the broader flooding emergency affecting the region's water infrastructure beyond the immediate landslide and evacuation response. South Korean disaster response authorities, coordinated through the Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasures Headquarters, continue assessing damage across South Gyeongsang Province, with officials cautioning the extent of the damage was expected to grow as rainfall continued in the immediate aftermath of the initial disaster. Rescue teams remained active at the Geoje site amid concerns that additional residents could still be trapped, and authorities continued monitoring reservoir levels across the region, including the Mundong Reservoir, for continued overflow risk as the emergency response transitioned from the initial rescue phase toward broader regional flood management. A region that spent 6 weeks watching its reservoirs shrink under one of its more severe recent droughts, then received within 3 days close to an entire summer's typical rainfall, including the single most intense hour of rain the city of Geoje has ever recorded in more than 50 years of measurement. That kind of extreme reversal isn't simply an unusual coincidence of timing. It's an increasingly documented pattern in how a warming atmosphere delivers precipitation, longer dry stretches punctuated by shorter, far more violent bursts of rain, each extreme in its own direction, rather than the steadier, more predictable rainfall patterns. Regions like South Gyeongsang have historically planned their water infrastructure around. For the residents of Geoje now dealing with a landslide, evacuated homes, and a damaged apartment building, this week's disaster arrived not despite the preceding drought, but in a very real sense, connected to the same broader weather pattern that produced it. We'll keep tracking this story and every other major seismic, volcanic, and extreme weather event happening around the world right now. Subscribe if you want to see the next update. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever experienced a sudden reversal from drought to flooding where you live? See you in the next one.